Okay riders, Journo Kris here today with the MotoHub demo Transalp 750 from Honda, new bike obviously. I'm going to give you a quick look at the ergonomics and hopefully give you a little bit of insight if you're considering one of these machines. Jumping on board, the seat height is quite low in comparison to a lot of the mid-range adventure bikes which tend to have quite tall seat heights, and that can be really intimidating for a lot of riders. Whereas with this bike, I will say number one, the seat height isn't too bad. I'm 180 centimeters, 32-inch inseam, easy to reach both feet to the ground. The ground is a little bit uneven here, which is helping on this side, but I can just get both feet flat.
I'll actually add I was a bit surprised when I double checked the seat height at 850mm, as riding the bike I just assumed it was quite a bit lower, and I was wearing my riding shoes, not my ADV boots, which add a decent bit of extra reach and would have made that reach to the ground even easier. So this should be a fairly accurate perspective for anyone with a 32-inch inseam in regular riding boots or even just shoes. A wider set of pegs would be very welcome with the adventure boots though, I'd reckon, and importantly you want to adjust the foot controls if you're doing a lot of standing, as they are in road or sitting orientation now or as stock on the bike. Removing the rubbers on the foot pegs will probably also give you a tiny bit more space between the seat and the pegs, with that bend in your knees there as well obviously. The Transalp does offer 200mm of travel front and 190mm at the rear, with 210mm of ground clearance, hence not really being able to bring the bike much lower without compromising that adventure capability, with 210mm of ground clearance still not huge for the segment. That curb weight of 208 kilos is really not felt too, which I found particularly impressive, as Honda don't have any tricky engineering like carrying the fuel way down low to help them there. The bike is just exceptionally balanced.
Obviously it is also quite narrow between the legs, not as narrow as some of the naked bikes, but it is pretty damn narrow, which is going to help you get a foot down if you're a shorter rider. And you can also quite easily just shift across in the seat and get one foot down flat, perhaps if you can't get both feet down flat. And certainly helping in that regard is the fact that this is a nicely balanced bike, which is something I bring up in my review, and it doesn't feel like a taller adventure bike to me. It feels like quite a small bike, especially when I get moving, particularly on the road, but even on like gravel roads like this, it feels like a smaller and lighter and more nimble bike. I don't feel the weight of the bike. It doesn't feel top heavy, which is always a concern with the adventure bikes for me. And because it doesn't feel top heavy, it's much more confidence inspiring. It's perhaps not as easy to ride as the Hornet, which is quite a bit shorter, but at the same time, I think when you're looking at a middleweight adventure bike, this is probably going to be quite an accessible machine for a majority of riders. The bars are quite wide. As you can see here, it's a very neutral seating position. It's quite relaxed. I found it very, very relaxed riding the bike. So in that regard as well, again, you know, if you've got back problems or anything like this, I think the bike will do a really good job for you. I'm 75 kilos or so. I'm probably, you know, weighing in maybe at 90 with all the camera gear, which does weigh a bit. The rear shock did a great job, so I wasn't having too many harsh bumps kind of sent up my spine. So again, if you've got back problems or anything like that, that's probably going to be a winning proposition for you. And then you've also got a nice clear kind of very upright view down the road, nice bit of wind protection, good vision of the dash as well, and very simple controls for what we're talking about these days, because you are getting an electronics package in this with power modes, engine brake, traction control, and then you've got road and off-road ABS, which is all within your ride modes. And the ride modes, they have power modes which give you your throttle response, which do make quite a difference. So certainly if you were to jump on this bike and find it a little bit too powerful as a less experienced rider, I wouldn't get on as a first rider, but for someone getting their second bike and jumping up quite significantly in power, you might be doing that. Chuck it in rain mode and it'll be a lot more manageable. Because it does really gentle down that throttle and the engine character. Back talking about the ergos, as you can see here, it's not super stretchy, like you're not really stretched out, and that's a result of it having a much shorter seat height, but it works for me. There are a little bit of vibes through those rubber clad pegs as the revs got high enough, and it certainly wasn't bad enough to be really intrusive or annoying, but something that I did notice. No vibrations through the bars whatsoever. And also standing on the bike, as you can see here, I can grasp with my knees really easily. It's quite a natural. I'm a little bit crouched, but not too much as far as the reach to those bars. They could be a little bit higher, but it's not a huge issue. In that regard, I actually found off-road, number one, I didn't need to stand up anywhere near as much as I thought I might have to, because standing up on an adventure bike tends to be much more comfortable where there's low traction and things like that. So very, very easily handler. But also standing up on the bike was much more natural than on some of the machines. Probably more so the much smaller machines, like the 400s to 500s. However, it's probably more the norm that these are quite easy to stand on for the larger machines because they're more off-road orientated. But anyway, again, I'm probably getting a little bit off track there. So as far as the overall kind of takeaways for this bike, fairly low seat height, obviously not the lowest of all the road machines, but for an adventure or for like a sports tourer, pretty good, pretty good. I think this is one to check out for the shorter riders, and back that up with being a very manageable machine overall, which is going to help a shorter rider or someone with less confidence ride this both on the road and off the road. So hopefully that'll help you. I don't have a pillion here today, but one of the considerations which is leaning me towards buying one of these is that it has some good two-up capability, and that's going to be an advantage there if you're considering doing that. Obviously, that's going to come down to whether you want a full adventure bike, like a 1200, which I think is overkill for me, but that's what some people want. Whereas if you're looking at for a more mid-range adventure bike, this is probably going to be a great one to consider. And obviously just jumping off with a foot on the peg there to make it easy to throw the leg all the way over. And it's obviously, some people aren't comfortable doing that, but that's probably the best way to do it if you are struggling to get your leg over the back of the bike. And yeah, nice and easy, even in the little bit of gravel we've got here. Obviously the ground is a little bit uneven here, but hopefully you can see that seat height is actually quite considerably low. And I stopped at Jerry's Cafe, which is a real motorcycling cafe here in Kulnara, and one of the comments that a lot of people was mentioning was, wow, that seat height is nice and low, which it certainly is. It's still quite a large bike, but I would say when you're riding it and when you're on board, that weight and that size falls away and you really don't feel that it's essentially a much larger machine than it actually is. And so obviously that has been done by Honda to keep it nice and accessible with quite a nice, comfortable seat. I wouldn't be surprised if there's even a lower seat height, which maybe removes a bit of comfort and a bit of padding to bring that a little bit lower based off the way that seat is designed. For me, I'd probably be looking at a comfort seat on a bike like this, just because I did find that a little bit too dense for my bony behind. But small criticism there. You are getting a standard rack on this, which is going to be something that your pillion can hold on to. You can chuck a top box on that quite easily without having to pay, hopefully, a huge amount for mounting hardware, which is a nice little money saver there. And while there aren't any kind of like seamless mounts for a pannier system, which is a little bit of a shame, you do at least get something for the top box.
A bit of a secondary point is the Transalp doesn't come standard with a centre stand, although there is one available in the accessory range at about 400 Aussie dollars. And since I'm mentioning accessories, there's a genuine top box and panniers available, and there's the usual shenanigans of selling the luggage separately to the mounting hardware, so if you're looking at pricing, you will need to look at all of that. It is also worth mentioning the Transalp has a low seat available that then knocks off a further 20 mils, so it brings you down to 830 mils, and that is going to be a great option for the shorter riders as well, although I'm going to guess that you'll probably lose a bit of comfort in adopting that seat.
That's all I can think of at the moment as far as the ergonomics. If there's anything that you're wondering about that I didn't cover enough, just let me know below in the comments. I'll do my best to answer your question as always. Stay safe out there, thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.